Welcome back to Exploring the Unseen online retreat. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Leslie Zare, author and sacred arts mentor. And this is the latest in an ongoing series that I'm co-hosting together with my colleague Karen Brown. Recognizing that we're in extraordinary times, we first gathered for Exploring the Unseen in April of 2023 to explore how working with the non-material world could support our individual and collective transformations. Then in January 2024, we presented Exploring the Unseen 2, Answering the Divine Feminine Call. We believe that in turbulent times of chaos and division like these, hearing this call and supporting the divine feminine to rise in each of us and in the collective has never been more needed or more urgent. Our vision for Exploring the Unseen 2 is a 3-part online retreat. Part 1 was our week-long January online retreat focused on how we hear the divine feminine call, what answering the call might mean, and how to embody and embrace the divine feminine mysteries. During part 2, we hosted 2 follow-up gatherings in February and March that supported the integration of everything we'd experienced. And now in part 3, we're returning with another week-long online retreat event with new speakers. Our sub-theme is Your Role in Answering the Divine Feminine Call. During this week-long retreat, we're looking into the outward expression of the divine feminine, specifically exploring how we might individually and collectively respond to the call and take inspired action to birth a new world. Whether you're new to this series or you've been with us since the beginning, we trust this will be a transformative experience for you. We have a number of inspiring and amazing guests for you, as well as free gifts. My guest today is Karen Brown, who is also the co-host. So let me introduce you to her now. Based in Toronto, Karen Brown is a certified professional coactive coach, movement facilitator, positive intelligence coach, and certified facilitator of Dr. Christine Page's Women's Mysteries for the Modern Woman. She supports women through personal and career transitions, initiations, and other mysteries of the second half of life, the feminine wisdom way. Drawing on more than 25 years' experience working with clients as a public relations and marketing communications consultant, she also loves to help women uncover their soul essence and how to express it through all aspects of their life. Karen's mission is to help women reclaim joy, vitality, and meaning, and fully activate their leadership and power during the most transformative time of their life, through remembering who they truly are, the archetypal wise woman. Karen offers private and small group coaching and consulting, online and in-person programs and events, and holds sacred space for creative solopreneurs to birth their soul-based projects into the world. She has also created a supportive community of women deepening into feminine wisdom practices through her membership journey, The Wise Woman's Way. Hi, Karen. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome as a guest.
Yes. I've seen you a few times before.
Yes. Here we go again. And with new things, there's always something new. So it's always nice to explore with you. So as we always begin our interviews, we begin with the question, how did you first hear the divine feminine call? So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. And I'm, if I may, I'm going to answer it maybe a little bit differently through the lens of what we're actually going to speak about today. So I'm going to think about the divine feminine calling and our calling, because I'm talking today about purpose and the work that we do in the world. And so I will say part of, for me, hearing the divine feminine call was definitely I was always a seeker. I had my personal life, I had a series of dissents and so on. But I also always followed the breadcrumbs, I guess I would say, of what it was that I felt called to do as my work, as my sole purpose. For me, those two things were never disconnected. I felt and just never occurred to me that we shouldn't do something in the world that we were meant to do, that we loved. So I started out as a dancer, and that was a hobby while I was in school. And then it just never occurred to me not to think of that as my profession. So I entered into the profession of competitive Latin and ballroom dancing and teaching. And then there was a little wobble. And I thought I'll just back up and say I think that was um, a divine feminine, divine masculine. Like, it's kind of the model of a pairing, right? In ballroom dancing, there's a pairing of not always now, but traditionally a leader and a follower. I don't necessarily like that language, but there was a synthesis of a melding of happening where I think ultimately you're listening and responding both. And for me, that was the melding of the divine feminine and the masculine, although I didn't have understanding of that at the time. Then there was a little wobble, and I went to teach in a dance studio, and it was very focused on sales, and it felt very inauthentic. And I really lost my way. I lost all interest in dance because of it, because the two things were connected for me. I was physically in the space where I would rehearse and all of that. So I ended up stepping away from that. I ended up in an early marriage, and I did a lot of very strange entrepreneurial things that were not in my calling. And again, I felt the pull away from my authentic self. And so in response, ultimately, I had to find myself again, find my new calling. And there was a move involved, a divorce, all of that. And once again, I was like putting out the divine feminine, like antenna to hear what is my next calling. But it had to be from so I was using the intuition, the feminine intuition, but wanting to be in my authentic power with whatever I did. So I've had many, many little shifts and turns in my career. I went from sort of working. So I worked in a corporate environment for really only a few years. They were, sort of really important years, but they were years in which I kind of had this sense of, this is a little strange. Like, I didn't totally fit in. I was like, well, can understand it, and I understand there are levels. You start out as a junior accountant, then you're a senior accountant, and then you're maybe you get to be a manager, and then maybe you get to be a VP, and then a senior VP. It was just like there's this weird hierarchical structure, and also these kind of unwritten rules, like billable time, because I was working in a PR agency. So what are your client billable hours? And I just really struggled with all of that. And it wasn't long before I said, I think I'm going to go out on my own. And then I also heard another calling, which was and this was through the process of my work. I had discovered some unethical things as well in some of the ways that health care clients, pharmaceutical companies, do the marketing that they do. And that also felt super out of alignment. So I moved into nonprofit and fundraising. And I kind of put those two things together, and I started hearing a calling. It was like a thing that sat on my shoulder. You need to advance complementary healthcare. So I founded a charity. It took me, there was a lot of resistance. It took me a while. But again, it was a calling. It would not go. I could not shake this thing off my left shoulder. Gremlin, absolutely. And so I pursued that through a lot of resistance, so much learning. I mean, and I never planned to be the person who ran it. I just wanted to instigate it. So it perhaps, looking back, was a little out of alignment for me to be the day-to-day administrative person. That wasn't perhaps right in the wheelhouse of my gifts. So it was a bit of a struggle, and the overall calling was in alignment with me. And we did do quite a lot of things before we had, we closed operations after like 7 years, something like that. And so then I was again in the void of, okay, like this very divine, feminine, fertile void of what is my calling now? Where do I take this? And ended up a whole bunch of iterations later in what I'm doing now, which really brings together everything. And I think that's the point, and that's what I help other women do now, is to bring together all the gifts, the skills, the callings, the expertise and experience, and what you love to do, what people are needing in the world, and then there's this kind of alchemical blend. So yeah, it's been, always through the divine feminine call, working my way through this kind of interesting labyrinth of career reinvention.
But I think if we are following a call, that is what happens, because we have to pick up pieces that may seem quite disconnected. I
Yes.
wrote a blog post about this, the crooked path, because for me as well, I started as a dancer and an ice skater, and then I studied biochemistry, and then psychology, and then uh, healing, and that all seemed very disjointed
Yes.
until I got to this place where it actually all came together. And I think that that again is the divine feminine call does take us in strange directions. But if you do that, you're picking, it's like a treasure hunt. You're picking up these pieces that eventually will come together. And I think it takes a lot of trust to do that. And I
Yes.
also think that that concept that we will go to university, study something, find a job, and work in that for the rest of our lives is a bit outdated. I mean, I think it especially is for women, but it probably is for men as well at this point in time. So,
Yes.
what do you're mainly working with midlife women. So why do you think this big career transition happens in midlife? Why is that, why are so many women at midlife looking to make a career transition?
Yeah. And yeah, this topic fascinates me because I work in all areas of midlife transition, initiation, etc. And one of the things that shows up the most in clients is this career piece. And so I've seen it, I've observed it, and also kind of tried to delve into what's going on underneath the surface so that I can help women make a decision about what's next for them that's in most alignment with their divine feminine call and calling. So I think what's happened, there's a confluence of events. And right now, as well, in particular, if you're a midlife woman right now in these times, there's even more of an amplification. But I think generally what happens is we might go through uh, whatever our profession is. We may have gone to, as you said, university to train to be a certain thing. There's an expectation that that's what you'll do at the end. And the traditional model is you do that thing, you work at it for 30, 40 years, you retire. That's kind of the story. And that's a hierarchical and patriarchal story that I think has been kind of revealed now for what it is and its limitations, right? And then so a woman goes through perhaps 20, 30 years, maybe also while juggling family and children, which is a very tough road to juggle all of that. Kind of a sense of, I'm getting caught up in the culture of 24/7 do. There's also a competitive aspect. There's a lot of things where the feminine has been removed, right, from this structure, as it has from many other kinds of institutions like organized religion, for example. It's the same thing inside of a corporate entity to varying degrees, depending on the culture, who's in leadership, etc. And so you may have been at the same thing, working your way up, fighting the glass ceiling, doing all of these things, and not realizing that you have lost a part of yourself and that you're not showing up as all of who you are in the workplace because you don't think you have permission, or you just don't even really know who that is anymore. And so I think because midlife is such an initiatory journey where everything comes into question, it makes perfect sense that as you're trying to figure out who you are, and what you're really, who you really are in all of the different facets, including what you're here really to exude out into the world. There's a disconnect there, right, in the work that you're doing. There can absolutely be. And so you've gone as far as you can, in that male model. And then you just hit like oh my goodness. And then I think there's another piece. Physically, right, we're changing. Um, and we're getting older. We are getting wiser, but perhaps, and again, this is a broad brush. Not every organization is like this, but there is some ageism. Oh, we want the young, more eager, more energetic talent. And so women feel forced to continue to fight and to put on a face and to go, 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 when actually what our natural rhythm is calling, if we're listening to it, is for us to slow down. And so women, I think, who are super stressed end up with more physical symptoms like the brain fog, which is not going to be, widely accepted in a corporate work environment. Or they may be getting a lot of hot flashes because of the fact that they're not rooted in who they really are. And so, they're burning up and burning out, as I like to say. And so this is, this is a big question mark over a woman's head at this time of life. It can be. What am I really supposed to do? And so, do I stay? Do I leave? Do I start something on my own? What's going to, happen? At the same time, in the last 4 years, so many things have happened that have really kind of shone a spotlight on all of this. We had people staying at home, and a lot of women realized that they were missing out on certain aspects. Some women found it very challenging. They had to continue working from home, which they'd never done before, and they were trying to homeschool children. That's a whole other conversation. But I think for perhaps for women who have older children or no children, this was a time of really looking at, and maybe for the first time in a while, who am I really? What are my values? Is this work actually aligned? And then there was a thing called the Great Resignation that started happening around 2021, 22. We heard a lot about it in the media, and it was women and men realizing that this was not their calling, whatever it was they were doing, and they were leaving. There were also job cuts, people realizing, this is not so safe and secure and stable as I thought. That's was a thing of the past. It doesn't so much exist now. And so what can I do using my gifts and what I really want to do so that I can feel happier and more joyful and make, money? And women in midlife are at different points. Some are wanting to ease into semi-retirement or retirement, but they want to feel purposeful. They want meaning. And I think that's a big thing too, wanting meaning, right? So aligning with your values, but also something that is meaningful. And I think at some point, many women feel that what they are doing has lost meaning, and that becomes more important. It's a higher on the list of values, and that's where there's that tension. And so now here we are, 4 years post pandemic, and then the trend now is that employers are trying to bring people back into the office, maybe 5 days a week. maybe 3, but people have gotten used to, even the ones who said they would never work from home, it just wouldn't work. Now they realized it can. And they don't want to go back and be commuting if you're in a big city and all of that. So it's just like the perfect storm right now for reevaluating calling, issues of calling, vocation, purpose, meaning, and how I'm going to spend those 8 or 10 or more hours a day that I've, you know, it's, I will say this is a bit maybe a controversial statement or a bit harsh, but it's a form of enslavement, right? The
Mhm.
corporate model. It's a structure. And if we're looking at building the new earth, this is a structure that needs some serious shaking up and reevaluation.
Absolutely. And I think it's based on things that don't make sense. For example, we say our generation now, now a lot of people are not going to college. So I think that's already one big change. But say our generation, we were expected to go to university out of high school. Who at 17 knows what they want to do with their lives? I mean, your brain isn't yet fully developed. So, how can you really make a choice like that? But we're expected to. Little children are asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" How would you know that? How
Mm,
could you answer that question? So, I think yes, once we've had some experience, probably a lot of people studied something, went into that field, and early on thought, "Oh my god, what have I done to myself?" I studied biochemistry. In my senior year, I realized, "Hang on, I am not gonna live my life in a lab, like,
yes.
that's that's what I get to do with this degree that I'm working for," and I had never thought about that. I studied biochemistry because I thought it was interesting, but I never thought about the
Mm,
next step. So I think that that's a premise that's absolutely unrealistic, that this whole structure for probably hundreds of years has been built on. There's no way you can know at that young an age what you really want
mm,
to do, or even probably what your
mm,
gifts are. So I think that these structures breaking down, they're built on sand. They're built on ideas that are not realistic.
yeah.
So I do think the pandemic woke us up to that, especially like the amount of hours people work, or as you said, the traveling, all of those things that you've already mentioned. So I think that we are ripe to build new structures, because we are really aware at this point in time. 10 years ago we wouldn't have been, but now we're really aware that doesn't work. None of that works. So I do think that yes, at midlife you probably have a big change for the reasons that you're saying, but I do think that the whole thing is breaking down. So
Yes.
this is our opportunity to envision something that is better. And I think you being in the field that you're in and having worked with women, even if it was women at midlife, you've seen how they've transitioned. So I think you would be a good visionary for what this new model of business could be, or career. Maybe business is not even the right word, but a career
Mm,
model, maybe. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's complex too because there are many jobs that are needed to be done in the world, but maybe how we do it, how we compensate people, how we think of people who are doing tasks that are menial, um, if they're done with joy. And we all have examples of that, that janitor in high school, or, it's about what you bring to it. That's a big piece. And so part of the exploration that I do with women, it's not automatically, well, you should just get out, it's bad, right? Well, first of all, as a coach, it's not my job to advise or tell people. I'm helping a client or someone who comes into a group to find the answers for themselves. So I'm a facilitator through asking questions, through experiential exercises, and so on. And so it's really about helping people find how, first of all, maybe I'm going to stay in this, but maybe, oh, I didn't realize that I shut off a part of myself. So for people here, if you're watching this, there's a part of you that loves to explore the unseen. This is not something that's typically celebrated or acknowledged in the workplace. So chances are you're not bringing a part of yourself just right there, you know? So how could you be more intuitive? How can you bring more empathy? So some of those feminine qualities that haven't been valued. There's actually a very interesting book and study and field of knowledge. It's called the Athena Doctrine. And what they did, it was a global study, interestingly by men, but that's an aside. But they looked at, they asked people from around the world that worked at different levels and different kinds of organizations to talk about what leadership qualities were, what they felt they were, and then to take each one and say, is this a feminine quality? Is this a masculine quality, or is this a neutral? And so they were assigned these things, and then they were plotted out on a chart. And what they found was the ones that were considered feminine were actually considered by everybody the most important, which is pretty cool. And so things like empathy, planning, probably more neutral, but what mother, let's say, or woman doesn't know how to plan, right? It's just,
Yeah.
there's a
And
disconnect,
multitask. Yeah.
right? All of that. Um, so that one was probably considered more neutral, but intuition, or instinct, if you want to, put it in a more mainstream term, having that foresight, right? The vision, all of that kind of thing. So we need to acknowledge that and be willing to be courageous, even if we've told ourselves this won't be honored, to show up. Creativity, that's another big one, right? Creativity was considered more feminine. And innovation, right? Which comes with creativity. So all of these things, and that's been amazing. That's like a great example of what people are really sensing into and feeling, but it hasn't been fully put out there, and then you discover it through studying it. So I think that there is an opportunity. So that's the first thing. Do you want to stay and show up more of yourself, realizing and maybe deconstructing some of the beliefs or mindsets that you didn't realize you had, that were actually making it more difficult and challenging for you to enjoy and give everything that you can to your work in a way that's more with grace and ease and flow, instead of that, forcing and pushing. Is there something you could do to negotiate in a way that, feels authentic and in your power, to work in a way that's better for you? Like, I would really like a hybrid position, or I would really like to job share with someone else. I would like to take a 6-month leave of absence. And people don't feel that they can ask for those kinds of things. So what is it that you could do and then stay and have a better experience and bring more of your author, or maybe you're playing small. We have this idea that leadership is at the top, but that needs to come down. You can be a leader in a junior position, just in the way you contribute and so on. So so for women who've been in a job for 20 or 30 years, how are you showing up? Like, looking at all of those things. Is this aligned with your values? So maybe you stay, and if it's not aligned with your values at all, if you cannot, because of the culture, do those things like come and ask for what you need and those kinds of things, if you can't contribute, then you may be looking at a move somewhere else. So what does that look like? How are you going to, again, not just move back into the same pattern, another job that looks the same, and 3 months down the road you realize, oh, this is just like the last one. So how do you move into that place of authority to show up differently? So that's another option. Or I'm going to pivot, try something completely different. So then we're looking at um, an inventory of your skills, your desires, your callings. As a child, what did you love? That's a huge clue that we miss, right? What did you do as a child that you did it because nobody told you to? You were maybe alone in your room and you did it because it brought you joy. There's a seed in there that could be a calling that you're being asked to bring out. And those things that we that's another piece. We often brush aside those things when we get into the later part of our schooling in favor of this is the plan. I will say too, it's just something you said earlier about children being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Actually, I think sometimes they may know. If you ask them when they're younger, they may
Very
know.
young, yes.
Yes, and then it gets, a bit
Yes.
cloudy because then the parents are putting often expectations of their things that weren't fulfilled for them. You've got to do this, or oh, you're so good at math, you should be a doctor. And then they become teenagers who feel a pressure to be accepted by their parents or to excel because they're expected to excel, or to keep getting those grades and then go into that career path even though their heart is telling them something else. I think what's really interesting, as a mother of a daughter who's a Gen Z, 19, I feel like they're coming in now with more of a strong sense of what they're meant to do, and they're less likely, because if they stay more aware, and I think more of them are, I just feel this sort of intuitively, that they are more likely to follow a path that is of their choosing and question. I think they're here to question. This whole generation is questioning all of the structures, including this weird workplace thing. And that's where they're like, they may appear, I think older people say, well, they're lazy, they are entitled. But I think, and that possibly could be an aspect, but I think it's more, they're saying, wait a second, this is doesn't look like fun. This doesn't look like joy. You want me to do this, what, for 40
Mhm.
years? I don't think so.
Nobody dared to say that in previous generations.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
I feel hopeful about that as well. And the possibility, maybe it's the possibility of women in midlife working with younger girls
Mhm.
to encourage this and to mentor. And I know we have another speaker talking about that as well. And so, yeah, overall, I'm hopeful about all of that.
And I think too, that probably these younger generations have the realization of how quickly things are changing. Because I know in the work that I've done that, a lot of times we're discussing what's your purpose? What's your life purpose? And then what should they do with that? And sometimes they can define like the things that they're passionate about or whatever, but they don't know what to do. And I always say, but realize that maybe that thing has not been created yet. As
Yes.
quickly as things are changing, you may have, I mean, I even think about myself and a lot of who would think that I would be working on the internet, if it was like 20, 30 years ago. So I think that if we can keep our minds open enough to allow something to come in that maybe we can't name at the moment, but we can sort of focus on it and we can feel
Yes.
where it is us. I do think the same thing with my life path. I mean, yeah, I did all these strange things and they did come to something that really didn't exist at the time that I was trying to figure out what I might be wanting to do with my life. So I think that that's another piece that maybe the younger generation has is that new things, new jobs will be created in new ways, and just to be able to be open to that concept, even if they have no idea what it might be or even how to get there.
Yeah. And I think the same is true for for women at midlife or anybody at any age is that things are shifting and transforming so quickly right now that I think, a big part of it is just knowing who you are and excavating and I don't like the word necessarily inventory, but taking a look at all of the skills, the gifts, the things you love, your childhood passions, and where all of those things intersect with what the world needs and all of that. That's ultimately where you're probably going, but it could be a thing, as you said, it's not even defined yet. The world, I think, is going to look so different, maybe in 2, 5, 10 years. I don't know how long, but and I think it's been so for a while with computers, as you said. I remember
Yes,
going to some conference at some point, and they said, people who are entering university now are they're not even learning what they're going to be doing. Like it's
exactly.
a whole other thing.
Yeah.
It's changing so fast. But I think now we don't know how this sort of expansion of consciousness and all of that is going to shift what's needed in the world. Like I kind of feel like if I don't have a crystal ball, but if I could sort of, a little bit of intuition around what's coming, and I think there's probably a lot of people here who are already out of the corporate world. So I want to mention that too. People who are healers and storytellers in different ways and, different kinds of way showers, right? I think that is going to be really needed. And so honing that and figuring out what is my soul essence and what's the expression of that. That's work I love to do with people, helping them pull together those disparate, weird pieces, like we were talking about, that they very often you have a blind spot, right?
Hmm.
Yourself. It's
Yes.
harder to see. But then when a coach or some other kind of way shower reflects it back, you're like, oh, I didn't see that. Or how you can use that to put on kind of a marketing hat for a second and be a bit marketing-y, your brand, right? Your the way you express it into the world in a way that's impactful, that people will understand it. You need to understand it first for yourself, and then so what does that show up from everything from what colors make me happy to what are the qualities, those core values are how you first you have to know what they are, and sometimes again can be elusive, or you can have a little blind spot. You kind of know but you can't articulate it, so I help you to articulate that and then how to bring that into how you communicate, how you work, how the pieces fit together in ways you might not have understood, and how you can bring that out in the world in a way people can understand it and feel aligned to it. Um, it's all about those core values and how any misalignment takes you off that purpose path, and you'll feel it. I think especially as we get older, as women, we feel that intuitively more. Oh yeah, it's not doesn't feel right, or the synchronicities aren't aren't there.
What
Like I'm
happening?
working on a project right now. Again, it's another piece from my past that's I kind of put down a little bit. I'm working on a big writing project, fiction actually, and it's metaphysical fiction. And I realized the other day, oh my goodness, this brings in everything I love: the mysteries, women who are creative, women at a certain age, movement, writing. It's about it's really amazing, and so I get so excited. I feel it differently in my body, and I see so many signs and synchronicities that are saying this path, this path, this path. Doesn't mean, of course, what I'm doing right now with coaching and all of that is also feels very aligned. But there's a little bit of magic right now as I'm just in that first blush, of discovery of this other piece. So that's what I want, my clients to feel, to get that excitement back. Um, yeah, when things have kind of gone flat, and you think, well, that's just the way it is, but it doesn't have to be.
No, and I think people hearing you talk about that and using your own example can make people realize that there are other ways to do things and that there are other options.
Yeah.
So if we the theme of this particular retreat is about how do we create a new earth. So, in your opinion, what would be some skills or roles that we would need if we were going to create a
Yeah.
new earth in the arena of life purpose or career or
Mm.
however you would want to define it?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked to some of it already. I think it's really about leaning into your intuition, using the embodiment, and asking. I remember actually, this is just popping in right now. When I was deciding, I actually, after I got divorced and I moved, and I actually had two job offers within like 3 or 4 weeks. Part of that, I think, was because I was like all in that flush of excitement and newness. And I had two offers, and I was only in my mid 20s, so I don't even know that I guess I did know back then to do this, but I decided in order to decide, I was going to lie on the floor and think about each one and see how it felt in my body. And I did that and I chose. And I know that the one I chose, I have no doubt that the one I chose was the right one. And is what, even though it was like sort of a weird circuitous path, that it was the right one. So I would say, um, for anybody in any kind of situation, but particularly for trying to figure out your role in the new earth, embodiment and intuition are key. That discernment, to know from your core in yourself, this feels right for me. Outside of external voices or well-meaning friends' advice or family, whatever it is, you have to feel it in your core, even if it's a little counterintuitive. Now, that's not to say abandon your job and risk it all if you have bills to pay, right? That's important, and that's a piece too. In the one of the programs that I do is that functional financial piece. Is this doable? Is this it can be a transition. You don't have to do all or nothing. You can slowly move towards, whether it's retirement or um, your own practice or changing your existing small business into something else. So don't abandon all logic.
Karen's
And
not telling you to throw it away.
I'm not. And lean into the discernment. And even if there's a bit of a risk, a bit of a risk is okay. If it's a risk that feels exciting, that's good. If it's a risk of, oh, I'm going to lose all my income, not so good.
Well, and as you said, there's other ways to do that. You can
Yeah.
transition into it. Maybe it is the right step, but there could be many ways to do it, not
Yes.
just
Yes.
by jumping off into
Yes.
you know, the
The
abyss.
event. Exactly. Exactly. And so there's the discernment and all those pieces, but then there's some planning. There's nothing wrong with
Yes.
our left brain, that thinks and plans. So, but I think the foundation is that other discernment piece to really know what's in your heart and soul to do.
And I think by saying that out loud or just by us accepting that concept that we should bring the intuition in, that we should bring the embodiment piece in, just to acknowledge that, I think is really important because it is very useful. But I think in the past, if you had said, "Why did you choose that job?" and your answer was, "Because I felt it in my body," you would have been ridiculed.
Yeah.
So I think we are at a place where those are concepts that can be used and integrated in a very successful way and to be accepted or used more often, or
Yes.
it's more accepted.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think that we can actually integrate those things.
Yes. And also, can we integrate those traditional ways, even if we, have kind of a feeling about them? They're not great the way they are, but what can we take? I do this in the personal work that I do. What's the pearl of wisdom here? that I can integrate, release the rest, and then be in that stillness to create something new. I think that's what we're being asked to do. And like you said, there's going to be many new roles to play. I think healers and all, as I said, are going to have a new role. There are people who are not aware and doing this work. And I think it's possible there could be some more shocks. Yeah, not to be negative, Nelly, but there could be more shocks coming where more wake up calls and
Yes.
all kinds of skills that exist in the world are going to be needed, but they're going to be needed in a new way, filtered through the divine feminine. And we are the ones, I always say this, we are the ones we've been waiting for. So whether it's, like think of all the systems, right? Our education system, our political system. Oh my goodness, that's a whole topic, right? What about women who know how to do circle work or know the indigenous ways? Can we bring indigenous ways or circle ways back into political? So it's not us against them. And if you're in the opposing political party, you have to hate everything this group is doing and go against them. If you're spending all your time in a room arguing with each other, like, I just don't even understand that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even make remotely any sense to me. But what about gathering like we used to in circle where everyone has a voice, where everyone is heard and honored and celebrated? What about systems of justice, that are done in that same indigenous way? I think we're kind of we're going to be blending. I think this is a prediction. We're going to be blending the ancient ways with modern technology in an ethical way. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, technology, right? There's nothing inherently bad about it and how we work it, but it's how we work with it and in whose hands it
Yes.
is and their intention. So, what that's going to look like in the new earth, I don't know, but I feel it needs, again, it's all about being in our integrity first and foremost. There's no room now for corruption and vested interests and hidden agendas and us versus them and these people get this but these people get this. No, it's over. And so whatever our skills are that we've had, start to think about that, how to use those. What are they? What do you feel most called to? And it could be a waiting game. Maybe we're waiting in the mystery right now. I think in a lot of ways we are. But you can start to feel into, who am I really? What am I really here for? What are my gifts? And then when the timing is right, you're ready. You have everything you need to move forward.
Well, I think that's the thing. In the darkness is the potential for everything. So
Mhm.
let's be creative. And as you said, feel into that. And what are some of the possibilities? And to be curious and creative and see what we can pull out. And as you said, we can look back. We can look back to the ancient cultures because what's happening now is not working. I think that that's really clear. But in ancient cultures, it did work. So let's look
Yes.
back and see what did work, and then maybe find a way to bring all of that together.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about. You always give me a lot to think about, and I'm sure everyone else feels the same way. So I hope people will think about this and consider, where they are, those points that you illuminated, work with those. And I think you have a gift for our participants, so maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, so I actually have two gifts. One is the gift that, for those of you who were in the January event, it's sort of the foundation. So it doesn't matter whether you're working with, personal transition or work transition. These are the foundational sort of inner working pieces. So that gift is 3 essential practices to unleash your wisdom and joy. Um, in the second half of life. And there's a meditation to meet your inner wise woman. There's a writing practice, which is great for getting information. And then there's the cyclical lunar cycle practice that I use. So whatever your transition is that you're working with, I recommend that. And I'm also offering a career alchemy session. So that's a complimentary 30-minute. There's no sales pitchy, icky, unethical. I've been there, done that, as I talked about at the beginning of my talk. So I do not do that. But we'll actually look at, so whatever work transition you're thinking of or working with, whether it's you're already out on your own, but there's something not quite working, or whether you're corporate and tearing your hair out, or anything in between. We kind of look at what's really going on. So I help you to get some insights. What's really going on? What's the real reason that this is feeling misaligned? And then a strategy or two to get you moving through that. And those are sort of a first come, first serve. I don't have a ton of time, but I'll have a calendar link that you can check out some options.
Well, that's great. Yes. So take advantage of those, and sooner rather than later, so that you can get in on that. That's very generous. So thank you. Thank you for those gifts. And if people want to get in touch with you,
Yes, wisewomanleading.com.
and you
And
are also
yeah, I try to
Instagram
be on Instagram. Not fully in alignment. I'm struggling with that one. Wise Woman Mysteries, yes.
and also
And
on
the
Facebook.
Facebook
You have
group,
a group.
yes, that's The Ageless Woman.
All right. Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you for being here and speaking with us and sharing your wisdom. I think you've given people a lot to think about and a lot of ideas. So if you are in transition, I suppose we're all in transition, but if you think that Karen is someone who could help you, then definitely take advantage of that free gift and have that 30-minute session. And use what Karen has told us in this video as well, and in this chat. I think she's given you a lot of information that you can work with on your own. So thank you, Karen. Thank you for being here and talking to me about this.
Thank you, Leslie.
And thank you to the viewers for being here. And if you happened upon this video and you're not already registered for the retreat, the link is in the show notes. And I hope that for those of you who are registered, you'll be watching the rest of the videos. And thank you for being here. Bye-bye.